This episode is brought to you by Naked Fig Soap. Shop over a dozen handcrafted artisan soaps locally sourced and made in Arizona using the finest non-toxic intentional ingredients. Naked Fig Soap also offers facial care products along with accessories like soap dishes, soap saver bags, and more.
Visit their website at nakedfigsoap.com and use code DRUMMINGUP, all one word, for 20% off online orders. And that is the best place to find her now.
Yes.
She doesn't really have a storefront so much as she
As
has
of right now.
Yeah, as of right now,
Yes.
she has her products in certain locations,
Yes.
which again is the best place to find her is at her nakedfigsoap.com website.
Yes.
Or her socials. Instagram is a great spot to find her. Ask her any questions where she's going to be at like a farmer's market.
Yes.
You can find all that out. Or
But coming up, she's
Yeah.
moving to bigger and better opportunities.
Yes, absolutely. And we're very happy to hear that because,
Yes.
we just want to make
She's one
sure
of our
she's doing okay.
favorite companies.
Oh, yeah. Whenever we're getting low, we always place our order.
Yes.
And again, use that code drumming up,
Yes.
all one word, to get that 20% off discount.
For sure.
nakedfigsoap.com. It'll be in the show notes. We'll have her website. And then the best thing to do is from the website, go find her socials, follow her. That helps her. And by you doing that, it helps us because we know you're listening. We know you're buying her great products. She also offers tattoo care and everything too.
Yes,
so
she does.
just a ton of stuff that she does. It's all locally made and everything. So what was that website again?
That is nakedfigsoap.com.
Using code drumming
Drumming
up,
Up.
all one word, for 20% off at checkout.
Hi there, this is Julian of Gorod, and you are listening to Drumming Up Conversation. Hell yeah.
Drumming up conversation. Drumming up, yeah. Drumming up, drumming up conversation. Drumming up, drumming up, drumming up conversation. Drumming up, drumming up, drumming up conversation. Drumming up, drumming up, drumming up conversation. Yeah!
This meeting is being recorded.
All right, so today we are joined by Ken Mary of Flotsam and Jetsam. He's the drummer for that band. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you, Justin?
We're doing awesome. So where are you from originally?
Well, originally from Seattle,
Okay.
and I kind of grew up in the Seattle metal scene that was happening in the early 80s or mid 80s, about the same time Flotsam was really kind of building their career down in Phoenix. I was up in Seattle with my high school band called Fifth Angel that ended up getting signed to Epic Records and also Nuclear Blast.
Very cool. And when did you start playing, and were the drums your first instrument?
Yeah, I started playing when I was in elementary school, and people always say, well, did you pick the drums, or why did you pick drums? And I always tell them, well, drums picked me. I didn't really pick them. And when I was young, I just was always enjoying, like even pens and pencils on the desk. Teachers would have to take them away, and I'd always be banging around with pots and pans. So it was one of those things that I think when you got into like sixth grade, they said, hey, do you want to play an instrument? And I was like, yeah, drums, duh. I think it's kind of obvious to everybody. So I did seem to have like a natural aptitude for it. And I was always like first chair in band and then stage band. And, it was something that seemed to come rather naturally. And at the same time, I worked at it really diligently, I think. I guess when you really enjoy something, it doesn't feel like work. I mean, I thought I was having fun, but I look back and go, yeah, I sure spent a lot of hours practicing.
Were your parents happy that you took drums?
Well, I'll tell you, my mother, my dad left when I was 5 years old, and I never saw him again, which is interesting, but my mother was a single mom raising 3 kids at that time by herself, and we were not well off financially. And I still remember to this day, my mom recognized that I was very serious about drums, and I was, and I appeared to have some sort of gifting at it. And I remember her taking me to buy my first drum, and we bought it used. We went to this, guy's house, and he had this small red sparkle kit, and she paid, I think, $150 for it, which in today's money is probably like, $500. But we were not well off financially, and I look back on that and go, what an amazing supportive parent, where the family is, she found the money to make that happen, and that to me is something I don't think I'll ever forget.
Yeah, that's great.
That's awesome. So did you take lessons?
I did. I took lessons from a teacher named Dick Stensland, and he was a fantastic teacher. He was he introduced me to Buddy Rich and Louis Bellson, and jazz and fusion and bands like Return to Forever and Yes, and Latin and pop and rock. I mean, he introduced me to all these different styles. Rudimental drumming. I mean, rudimental drumming I'd already been introduced, but certainly he was, teaching me about sheet music and reading music and writing music and all these different styles and all these different great players. And so I think it had a big effect on me. And then, of course, I think I was 11 years old or 10 or 11 years old, and I saw Kiss. And that was my mom let me go with an older friend, and I went to see Kiss at the Seattle Center Coliseum. And, at that point, I was like, I want to do that.
Is that when Eric Carr was with them?
No, that was the original Kiss. I think this is
Okay.
like 79 or something. I think it's I'm
Okay.
trying to remember what tour it was, but it certainly was an amazing concert, especially when you're young, and you see all this stuff, and bombs are going off and confetti, and the drum riser was going up and going out, and all this crazy stuff. I mean, it was the first concert I ever saw of that magnitude. Well, actually, that was the first concert I ever saw. And it was, what an impression it had on me. And it's really kind of funny because later on I was able to work with Gene Simmons in a band called House of Lords. So I worked pretty closely with Gene. And, it's always interesting when you get to work with one of your childhood heroes. I told him when I met him, I said, you owe me about $1 million because I had all the Kiss posters and the albums, and I, would go see the concerts, and he said, sorry, no refunds.
That sounds like Gene Simmons.
Yeah, we actually had that written down. Part of our side notes is the Gene Simmons tie-in and all that.
Oh, did you?
So yeah, we did. We did. So
That's funny.
So you talked about doing school band. Did you do drumline as well?
I did. I was in orchestra. I was in my high school. I actually graduated early because I was. I don't want this to sound like I'm speaking of myself highly or anything, but I did do very well in school, and I was able to graduate at the age of 16. And I do remember that the year that I left school, I think I had 4 music classes on my schedule. I think I had stage band first thing in the morning at 6:30 a.m. Then I had regular band class at 11. And I had a thing called music workshop, where you basically just went and practiced your instrument for an hour. And then I had there was one more class. I don't remember what it was. And then I would rehearse with my high school band, which are the guys that became Fifth Angel. And, we used to play gigs on the weekend. And I think about how much I was playing drums, in that time period. I mean, I was playing drums the majority of the day. But for me, again, it was fun. It was not work. I really enjoyed it. So, no problem there.
So how old were you when you started Fifth Angel?
Fifth Angel was really formed out of Ted Pilot, Ed Archer, and myself. And they actually saw me playing drums when I was in junior high. And they were in high school, so they were older. I was always running with the older kids, which was kind of funny. But Yeah, they saw me play a talent show when I was in junior high, and they're like, "Hey, why don't you come down and play with the band?" And I did, and they were fantastic. I mean, they were great players, and Ted was a great singer even back then, and they had great gear, which was always very important back in those days. Like they had a PA system, and they had guitar cabinets and microphones, and all the things that you needed. So we used to play tons of live shows. We ended up where we were, we owned a truck, and we had like a 30 par light light system. We had a road crew that used to travel with us. So we'd go and they would set everything up. And we actually, back in that day, you could make a lot of money playing, like high schools. We had certain high schools that just loved us. I actually played my own high school, which is really kind of funny. When I was I think I was in 10th grade, and but anyway, it was a great time, and Fifth Angel was born out of that band. James Bird was added, and I think as far as what happened after that, you guys may or may not know the story. Are we supposed to get into that, or do you want to talk about some different things?
No, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, well, anyway, we started recording some demos at a place called Steve Lawson Studios, which is now it's a studio named Bad Animals. It's owned by Hart. But back then it was called Steve Lawson, and we raised about $10,000, which, and again, in today's money is probably like $30,000. But we were very serious about making a great album, and we had to do the off hours. I think it was like after 7 or after 9 p.m. They would let us in there, and they would charge us $50 an hour. Back in that day, again, that's probably like, spending $150 to $200 an hour today. But anyway, we were very serious about it. We made a great record, and it ended up getting picked up by Shrapnel, which was discovered Yngwie and Tony McAlpine and so many great guitar players and so many great players. I mean, even drummers like Dean Castronova, who's a friend of mine, who's in Journey. He was, I think, initially discovered by Mike Varney at Shrapnel too. So Mike Varney in that day, he was really had his pulse, or had his finger on the pulse of the talent that was coming up. So he signed Fifth Angel, and it ended up getting picked up in Europe by a small little label called Roadrunner. And Roadrunner at the time was this fledgling label out of the Netherlands with distribution through CBS, which is really good distribution. So our album came out over there, and we started getting more sales and more press and more attention than a lot of the bands that were on major labels. So the next thing we knew, Epic Records flew out, met with the band, made sure we could play at a rehearsal. I mean, we didn't even play a show. They just came down to rehearsal, signed the band, and at the time we signed a very lucrative deal in that era. I mean, I think they expected big things from us. And people don't remember this, but Epic at that time was the #1 record label in the world. They had an artist called Michael Jackson who sold at the, I think by the mid to late 80s, I mean, they were just rolling in Michael Jackson money. I mean, I forget how many millions Thriller sold, but it was some insane amount. So, people think, oh, they gave you some ridiculous deal. And I'm like, well, yeah, they did, but they had so much money on hand, they didn't really know what to do with it. So,
Yeah,
Wow.
for sure.
And how old were you at that time?
what's that?
And how old were you at that time?
Let's put it this way. I was a teenager, and I remember I'm going through the contract, which was an 80-page contract. And it's a weird thing, but negotiating the contracts always kind of fell to me for some reason. And I was the youngest member of the band. I guess I'm the only guy that really cared a lot about it. But I remember I was on the phone with Mike Varney, and we're talking about points and the deal and this and that. And I have no idea really what I'm talking about at that point, but I learned very quickly. And by the time the Epic contract rolled around, we had an attorney in New York that was, again, probably $200 an hour back in that day. And I remember, calling him and going, hey, I'm reading through this contract, on page, whatever, it's saying, this, and this. And I'm like, well, what if this and this happens? And he's like, oh, I guess that's possible, and this is, when you think about it, I don't know that much, but the thing is my tail end is on the line signing this contract. So I want to make sure that, we catch any of the gotcha kind of clauses in there. And I, to be honest with you, I was catching things that the attorney wasn't catching. So, and that I think, to me says, I obviously cared about it a great deal, and I probably would have been a great attorney if I would have followed that that course. But of course I didn't.
And who are some of your influences? You talked about Louis Bellson and Buddy Rich and all that. Who else?
Sure. Well, I'd say I'm actually doing a series coming up, hopefully start September, and it's going to be on the 3 drummers that were the most influential to me. And I mean, there's plenty of drummers that I've been influenced by. I think if you're watching anyone talented, you're going to certainly see things and absorb some things and learn some things. But the drummers that were kind of key in my development, I think, were Neil Peart from Rush, which I know has been a huge influence on like almost every drummer. There's rarely a drummer you will find that will not say that he influenced their drumming. John Bonham, another drummer that everybody says influenced them, and also Buddy Rich, who I think is, in my opinion, probably the greatest natural talent that the drumming world has ever seen. And what people don't realize about Buddy Rich and what makes him so special to me is you can look at videos now. He's been dead for over 30 years. And you can watch one of his drum solos now, and I challenge anyone to just go ahead and try and play it. Go ahead and play it. Like, there's a lot of guys that can play Neil Peart. There's a lot of guys that can play John Bonham. Try and play Buddy. It's even this many years after his death. He was born in 1917. There was no YouTube. There wasn't listening to records and trying to glean from other drummers. I mean, there was really nobody to influence him. He had to kind of write the book on everything, and he actually influenced me for a second time. I was having big health problems with my lower back in the 90s, and I basically had stopped drumming for a while. And then I saw a video of Buddy Rich playing with Frank Sinatra in the Dominican Republic, and you can find this on YouTube. It's Buddy Rich, Frank Sinatra, Dominican Republic, and solo or whatever. And he's, at this time, I think he's 60 some years old. I think he was probably maybe 63 or 64. And he walks out on stage, and he looks like an old guy, and you kind of go, you think to yourself, like, he's going to go out there and suck. He's not going to be very, very good. And he sits down and just rips your face off for like 5 minutes. And I'm just going, and I thought at that time, I was probably in my 40s at the time. And I looked at it and I went, if he can do that at his age, and I'm sure stuff on him hurts, I'm sure his back hurts or his neck hurts, or, I'm sure there's something on him that was hurting at the time. And he still just went out there and just kicked butt. And I saw that, and it actually inspired me. It actually re-inspired me to get out there, start playing again, get into touring again and everything. And I really kind of owe it to Buddy Rich.
Very cool. Yeah. His snare work alone just is incredible. What he did on that. And I mean,
his left hand his left hand is, I'm going to use the term inimitable. I mean, it's like you really can't imitate. Like you can get something close, but the guy is kind of a freak, and or was kind of a freak. I mean, the thing is he wasn't, apparently the nicest guy. If you were, in his band, he did have some issues and things like that. But I'm just talking about like the drumming itself. I think he's phenomenal. And you could talk about Neil and John Bonham too. I mean, they're also incredible players and very influential players, but for totally different reasons. Mm-hmm. Buddy is speed and precision. Bonham is groove and feel. Neil is, composition. I mean, the stuff that he came up with, and he showed us that we could play and make drum parts that are actually part of the music and very musical, and that are exciting and entertaining and technical, but that still are driving the music. So I mean, they're all incredible players, and they all influenced me greatly. So I don't want to sound like I'm favoring Buddy more than the others. It's just that Buddy kind of holds a little bit of a special place in my heart, because he did kind of like re-energize me at a point where I wasn't, physically feeling all that great, and he kind of gave me the spark to just, get that fire lit again.
Well, and Neil would agree because he did the Burning for Buddy, so he would be like, no, Buddy Rich needs to go above me anyway. So he was as big a fan as anyone of Buddy was.
Well, yeah, I know that Neil liked Buddy too, and it's I think if you're a drummer and you understand what he's doing from a technical perspective, I think a lot of drummers, they look at him and they just go, oh, he's just playing on the snare drum for 15 minutes, and it's really not. And when you're young, it just sounds like a big glob of notes because he's so fast, everything's going by so quickly. But when you get a little bit older and you can really understand what it is he's playing, the respect level, it's just, just respect, man. It's like, the fact that he came up with that, he was so far ahead of the game. And that's the weird thing to think about too, like in athletics or medicine or any other field, you can look at somebody now and they're better than somebody that from, 50, 60, 70 years ago. It's just the way it is. The athletes are, they're trained better. They have better medical care. They can run faster. You've got guys that are, 300 pounds now that are extremely fast. And so it just, everything keeps getting better and better. And drumming does too. The drumming that's come out in the last few years is actually pretty phenomenal as well. But I guess the thing that surprises me is you think about it and you go, Buddy was born in 1917, and you can still look at his solos today and just be wowed and awed. And that to me is like, there's very few drummers you can say that about. You look at Gene Krupa, for instance, who was also an influence, and I love Gene Krupa. I think he was fabulous. Certainly kind of set the tone for all drummers, the showmanship, the stick twirling, all that kind of stuff. That all started with Gene Krupa, and he's amazing. But if you look at Gene Krupa's solo today compared to the way people looked at it in 1930 or 1940, we look at it and it kind of looks very basic. And the thing about Buddy is he's from that same era, and it's not so basic even now.
Yeah, and you brought up Louis Bellson as well. He's the first guy to use 2 bass drums, which was innovative for that time. And you listen to like Skin Deep, and it's like, wow, that's cool hearing those double bass drums going when he's doing the snare stuff. And
what's funny about Louis? I think if Buddy had not been around, Louis would have been Buddy.
Yep.
And that's the weird thing. I saw one drum solo of Louis that was absolutely phenomenal. An incredible drum solo that he did. And I have to go see if I can find it again, because a lot of the times, especially when Louis was playing Buddy, because they would kind of do these jams and they would both trade fours and stuff. And I don't know if he was holding back or, too much respect for Buddy or whatever, but, in my opinion, Buddy always kind of wiped the floor with anybody that he that he had a drum battle with. And I think in Louis' case, it might have been because, possibly he was holding back, because I did see some solos with Louis that were absolutely phenomenal. So I think if Buddy had not existed, Louis Bellson would be the guy that we're talking about right now.
For sure. And how was it working with Alice Cooper and Kip Winger on the Raise Your Fist and Yell? Because I know that was how kind of Kip Winger got his start. So I'm just curious how that went.
Well, Kip and I were, we were roommates back then. And, it was also working with Kane Roberts, who's a dear friend of mine, and we talk on the phone. We have a lot of other business that we do together. And so we talk on a regular basis. I just saw Kip. I played a show in Terre Haute, Indiana, and Winger was playing there as well. And so we got to hang out and see each other for a little bit. But, what can I tell you? Kip is a fabulously talented human being. Incredible voice, incredible bassist, incredible writer. Same with Kane. Incredible guitar player, incredible writer, incredible vocalist. Alice Cooper is a complete legend. He's even back when we were doing that album, we knew that he's a future Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee. And sure enough, obviously he is. But so, we knew that this was an important record, and we wanted to obviously do our best and make it a great record. And I think we did. I think that there's some unfortunate things about that record in terms of the business side of it. I think MCA was just a wreck at that point. They had a Coliseum sold out tour And I don't know what they were doing on the promotion of that record, but they didn't do a very good job, is all I could say. People say that about the record companies all the time, but there are certain instances where you definitely look back and go, seriously? And I think part of the problem is I don't think they understood the music. They didn't have anything rock on their label at all besides Alice. So, I think that's a problem too. If you would talk in that same era about labels like Geffen, like who had, they would have tons of artists. I'm trying to remember what label Def Leppard was on. But those types of labels that had rock and they understood it and they understood how to market it, that was not MCA.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because I know that like Megaforce was a big rock one that in that era too, where a lot of bands were coming from. And yeah, that's not fun to be the only rock band on a label because they just don't know how to treat you and what to do with you. So I totally...
Well, they didn't, and I think if you look at labels, I think Def Leppard might have been on Polygram, and there's a label that really understood rock. Atlantic understood rock. There were definitely labels that if you were on the label, they could really make things happen. And we always used to joke about it, but back in that era, MCA was called the Music Cemetery of America, is what they called it. And it was kind of true.
Yeah, yeah. So we assume you've toured a lot. Do you have any favorite venues or locations and any Spinal Tap moments?
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that last part, Justin.
Favorite venues and locations from touring and any Spinal Tap moments that you recall from those tours?
Well, there's a couple of Spinal Tap moments. Oddly enough, we really don't seem to have that happen with Flotsam, and I hope I didn't just say that. Now we're going to have a bunch of them, but I can remember a couple of
that either.
What's that?
I said I don't want to be responsible for that either.
Yeah, so let's hope that that's not what happens here. But as far as Spinal Tap moments, we did have a couple on the Alice tours. One that I can think of, I do a lot of stuff where I'm playing and I toss sticks up and then catch them. And we had a truss rod that used to go, across over the top of us with a bunch of lighting in it. And I do remember, one show I was playing, and I wasn't watching, and I tossed it up, and somehow that thing got, hit it just right and ended up sticking in the trussing. So I'm playing and I'm waiting for it to come down, and it never came down. So I had to grab another one. It's just one of those weird things that as a drummer you just like the odds are like 1 in a bajillion that would happen, and it happened. So, and then the other one that was kind of a little bit of a Spinal Tap moment. The other one was this happened to Kane, and on the Alice stage it was it was back in that day, it was kind of amazing. I mean, the lights would go down and the audience would just be, wow! I mean, they're like the audiences back in that era were just absolutely insane. It was so great. I mean, just amazing audience. But this is where we kind of learned that you could almost, on a Coliseum stage, you could literally almost do anything and get away with it. So Kane, we have these risers that we would, he would walk down. And, on an Alice stage, it was a little bit of a complex stage. There were, doll heads and swords and fake blood and balloons and monsters and, all this crap on the stage. So Kane walks down for his solo and he slips on a doll head. And so he's kind of spinning around, very awkwardly. And then he slips on some blood and he's flying around. He's trying to get his guitar solo started, and he's just like, it looks like something out of, like, I don't know, some movie or something. But the bottom line was, so he kind of almost makes it back onto his feet, but then falls flat on his back with his guitar. And so all he did, he just went like this and just put his fists in the air like this, and the audience just went, wah! It was like the audience just went crazy as if he just played like the greatest guitar solo ever. So that's where we kind of learned, like, you could almost do anything on stage, and as long as you do this, you're okay.
Exactly. Just act like it was meant to happen. So, yeah.
Do you have any favorite venues here in Arizona that you like to play?
I'm turning my volume up. Favorite, which was that?
Do you have any favorite venues here in Arizona that you like to play?
Arizona. I don't know. I mean, I certainly love venues like Wacken in Europe, and Joe Louis Arena before. I think they tore that down. That was a favorite place of ours to play. I certainly the Seattle Center Coliseum. I certainly liked playing Long Beach Arena in California. Trying to think of any other special venues. Phoenix. Trying to remember what the I did play some nice venues in Phoenix, but I'm trying to remember what's the one that kind of looks like the saddle thing.
Oh, the
Coliseum.
Maricopa County Fairgrounds, right? Is that the?
Is that what it is?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the exact name of the venue, but I know which one you're talking about. It's right where they have the fair every year and stuff like that.
Well, that's one of my favorite venues that I have.
Phoenix Memorial.
Yeah, I think it's Memorial.
Okay.
I think it is. Yeah, I was going to say that's one of my favorite venues that I have no idea what the name of it is.
I saw Alice Cooper on
my favorite venue. It's my favorite venue. I have no idea what it's called, but it's my favorite venue. But anyway, I really enjoyed that playing there. I mean, I enjoyed playing the Celebrity Theater as well. That's kind of a weird and unique venue, where the stage is moving around the whole time, and that actually is kind of cool. I mean, I did enjoy playing there. Trying to think of if there's anywhere else that I've played in Arizona that I really liked, but I think that probably covers it.
Okay. And how was the Flotsam audition process?
That's a great question, because it's almost a funny story, because I just went down and jammed with them, and I think Flotsam is a weird entity in terms of the band. I mean, it's a very unique sounding band, and it's really something that I think every drummer is going to sound different, in Flotsam. And so I think the audition process was just come down and play, and that was really about it. And I think everybody kind of felt like, oh yeah, I think Mike told me, he goes, yeah, I could tell like within like 1 minute, and that's the kind of the truth in auditions. Like, you can kind of tell in a couple minutes if somebody's going to work out or they're not going to be able to do it. And I think within a couple minutes, everybody's like, yeah, this is going to be fine. Now, the funnier part of the story is, when did you actually join Flotsam? Because I can't really answer that question. I just kept showing up and nobody fired me. So, I like at some point I became an official member. I'm not sure when that was, but like nobody ever, it was never like, hey, Ken, you're an official member of the band. It was like, I was there, I showed up, I played, and it's sort of like a stray dog that shows up at your house. At what point does it become your dog? I don't know.
Fair enough.
So, Rush was notorious for not having a huge female fan base.
So they say.
Although the show that I went to, that Justin took me to, there was tons of females there, and I know a lot of female Rush fans. What kind of female fan base does Flotsam and Jetsam have? Because I love the music. That your band's great.
Oh, thank you so much. That's really funny, because I have met some, definitely heavy duty female Rush fans recently, and that it actually surprised me, because I was a big fan of Rush, in the early 80s. I think the first show I ever saw with them was 90, and I will tell you this, there were like no women there at all that I remember. I don't remember seeing any female fans at all. With Flotsam, I mean, there are some female fans, actually, especially on the European side. I think in Europe, I think metal is a little bit more of a staple. Like, I think metal might actually be maybe one of the most popular forms of music in Europe, whereas in the United States, I think it's I don't want to say regulated, but I think it's controlled to a large degree. I don't think that it fits like whatever. Like, here's the thing. Explain to me how Wacken has, 80,000 people at it, and Hellfest has 150,000 or whatever, and bands like Arch Enemy will play Europe, and they'll play in front of 100,000 or 200,000 people. They'll play South America. They'll play in front of 500,000 people. They play America. They're playing 1,500 people at, House of Blues. Like, explain to me how that's even possible. Like, how is metal huge everywhere else in the world except for the United States? So I kind of think there's something going on with, you know, Google and YouTube and Facebook, and, you know, all the tech companies are suppressing it to a certain degree. I can't tell you why. You'll have to come to your own conclusion as far as why that is. But you can't tell me like metal is huge everywhere else except for the United States. So, but to get back to your original question, that, you know, there are some female fans for Flotsam. I don't think it's quite like it was for Rush, but I do know, like you're saying, that Rush definitely has a, you know, currently has, it's a little bit of a different situation, and they do seem to have a female fan base as well.
Sure. And so, like, I mean, we've listened to a ton of stuff you've played on, you know, Fifth Angel and Alice Cooper and House of Lords and all that. And I've always loved your drum sound.
Thank you.
Yeah, is that something that you first of all pride yourself on, that you took a lot of time with? And is that also what led you to open up the Sonic Fish Studio?
What was the first part of the question?
As far as like, how did you like learn about like tracking drums at an like early part of recording, because your drums always sounded so great, that it helped you go, I want to do this, I want to have my own studio, and that led to the Sonic Fish?
Gotcha. Yeah, as a matter of fact, you know, I think, you know, people going, well, your drums always sounded so great. Well, you know, I was really blessed to work with some of the greatest engineers and producers on the planet. You know, I did 2 records with Andy Johns, who engineered the, you know, like Led Zeppelin records, like Led Zeppelin 4, you know, which is like, you know, Stairway to Heaven and When the Levee Breaks and all that kind of stuff. You know, I did 2 records with him, and he was famous for firing drummers. He fired like Kazi Powell and, you know, a bunch of famous guys because he didn't like their feel. You know, he was looking for that Bonham feel, and I was able to do that. Like, I could easily play, you know, because Bonham was an influence on me. I could do that. I could do Neil. I could, you know, play Buddy stuff. You know, I could incorporate a lot of different things. But Andy was very, you know, complimentary to me. But I know that he was really tough on drummers. And so I worked with guys like Terry Date, who, you know, did, you know, the Pantera records and Deftones, and, you know, like Soundgarden. I mean, so many huge albums. Like, he did the first Fifth Angel record, Dane records. I got to work with Mac, who produced Queen. I got to work with Terry Brown, who produced Rush on the second Fifth Angel record. So, you know, it's like I literally worked with some of the best engineers and producers in the world, and I always tried to learn, what, you know, how they mic'd, the miking techniques, what kind of preamps, what kind of EQ. And I learned probably the most of what I know from a great friend of mine, Michael Wagner, who produced, you know, bands like Metallica and Megadeth and Ozzy Osbourne and Janet Jackson. And I mean, the list goes on. I think he sold like 60 million albums. So, you know, fortunately, I was able to learn from the best of the best. And, you know, that kind of led me to do my own studio. And that was a very important thing for me in the 90s, when I really felt like I couldn't play like I could previously. Like, there was a time in the 90s where I would sit down, do a drum session for a couple hours, and stand up off the drum stool and barely be able to walk. So it was a very difficult time for me, and I really kind of threw my heart into producing and singing and writing, and really enjoyed that too. I mean, I enjoy all aspects of the music business, but it was a you know, blessing for me to have worked with, you know, when you talk about, you know, studio, was I always interested in that? I was always interested in production. And I think a lot of drummers end up becoming producers, and I think a lot of them, you know, feel like they want to have more involvement. And I think unless you're a writer, you know, like in a band situation sometimes, like I am a writer, so I don't feel like that now, but I think in the early days, you know, before I really honed my writing skills, you know, you feel like you want to contribute in some way. And, you know, the other musicians, you know, the guitar player and singer are generally writing most of the stuff. And you feel like you want to have, you know, some input and, you know, like you're bringing something to the table. And for me, producing, you know, was kind of the outlet for that.
Cool. And do you have, like, because I know being a drummer, it sometimes sucks setting up in a studio. Do you have drums ready to go if someone just wanted to use that kit? to record?
I do. I have my drum kit like mic'd up always, and sometimes it's just patching some cables at the patch bay and just checking the connections. But I have my EQs and compression, everything's all set up, ready for me to just track, and so I can usually go in at any point and within 15 to 20 minutes, maybe half hour, be just ready to track drums, which is a huge thing because as you just pointed out, I mean, normally that's in some studios could be a 6-7 hour process or maybe a 4 hour process. So it's really something I again feel very fortunate that I'm able to have a studio and to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's really cool. 'Cause like I said, it makes a big difference with time. So, do you teach?
I haven't been teaching for years and years. I did teach early on. It's something where I don't know if I would teach again. I guess it depends on, if I had some students that I really felt, I think if you have students that are really sold out to it, that are talented, that really want to do something, I think that would probably motivate me to teach. I think, the idea of, teaching, really sure this is what they want to do, and they're not really sure how much they love drums. When I was teaching, I had probably 75% fell into that category, and maybe 25% fell into the category of, they took it really seriously. And that's the challenge, when you're trying to disseminate, information, and you're trying to teach, and you're trying to, give somebody tools to be great at something, and they're not doing the work. It's kind of a waste of your time to a large degree. So I guess it would depend on the students. I mean, I don't teach now, but I mean, I may. It just depends on who the student was, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so we watched some of your videos and stuff, and I noticed that you twirl with both hands. Did that take a while to learn? Because I can't do it left-handed.
Actually, my left hand, yeah, both of them are kind of equal. And people always talk about the left-handed, stick twirl that I do. And I think because there's a certain way that it looks, it goes backwards and then forwards. And people are always like, what the heck are you doing there? Can you show me that? Like, I've had a lot of drummers ask me that. I can do the same thing with my right, but I usually don't because it's easier just to do a standard stick twirl with the right. But yeah, I don't know if it took me a long time. It was something I've been doing since I was a kid. So, and I'm trying to remember who really influenced that. People always talk about, because there's this weird controversy. I've actually had trolls, like go on Facebook and talk about my, stick tossing and twirling like it's some huge negative thing, that's horrible. And I'm just like, well, it was good enough for Buddy Rich and John Bonham. I've got video of John Bonham doing stick twirls. I've got video of Neil Peart doing stick twirls and stick tosses. And I'm like, you know what, dude? If it was good enough for them, and they're like some of the greatest drummers of all time, I think I can go ahead and do that.
For sure.
So how many drum kits do you have, and how many snares do you have?
That's a good question. Snare drums, which, by the way, I'm going to talk about a really good friend of mine, Rich Bloom. He's off the East Coast, and he makes snare drums. I just want to give him a little plug real quick. He's a really awesome guy, and he built me 4 different snare drums that I have. So right off the bat, I have 4. And then he also sent me one by Canopus, which is a really amazing snare. So just from Rich, I have like 5 snares. And I think, actually 6, because he sent me a hand-hammered pearl snare too. So I think, I'm guessing I probably have about 12 to 15 snares. And as far as you can't have too many snares. I mean, that's just, and I think under Arizona law, I think you're allowed to have, up to 50 snares. So
I think you need to increase your collection.
And as far as kits, I only have 2 kits right now. I have my Yamaha RTC, which I've had, actually I have part of it. I don't have the entire kit, but I have half of that kit, and I've had that since when I endorsed Yamaha, and I was actually in all the advertisements for the RTC series. So I've had that since the 90s. And then I have my Pearl reference kit, which is the top of the line Pearl, and it's made out of Nashville. and great drums. I endorse Pearl, Sabian, Vader, Aquarian, RB as well. So those are the companies that I work with currently.
Awesome.
Justin has 3 snares, and when he wanted to get another one, I was like, why do you need another snare? But everybody else that we've talked to says he needs more snares.
Well, here's the thing. They do all have a different application. They do all sound different, and the weird thing about a snare drum is it's not like how many kits do you need? I don't think you need 10 kits, like drum kits, because they're all going to sound, depending on the heads and how you have them set up, they're going to have they can have a similar sound. But I think with the snare drums, there's a lot, like I have popcorn snares that are very small. I've got piccolo snares that are very thin, and sometimes those sound the biggest in the studio, which is really weird. And then I have deeper snares, which sometimes even sound, sometimes they sound thinner in the studio, which is really just, it's counterintuitive. But I guess the thing with snares is it's a very important part of the sound of the recording, and they do sound different. So if you have, a variety of snare drums, I think it'll allow you to get, a lot of different sounds in terms of what style of music you're playing on and what you want it to sound like. So, but I do have some go-to snares where I'd say most of the recordings that I do, I'll use, 2 or 3 different snare drums on.
For sure. Cool. So we're gonna do some rapid fire, and then we'll be letting you go. Ready?
Okay.
All right.
Yes.
Click or no click?
Both. I will do both just as easily. But I think for recording, I like click because you can, you can cut and paste. Like when you're laying the other tracks, like guitars or bass or vocals, you can take pieces from other places and they'll fit perfectly in. So I think for the recording process, I do like the idea that there's a click being used.
Cool.
And it can be a tempo map too. Like it could be like we did a song called "Cry for the Dead" where the tempo is moving up and down during the song, and I think that's fine too, just as long as you have something where you can utilize the modern tools that we have in the studio.
For sure. Double pedal or double kick?
Double kick when you can, because if you have to get speed, it's easier to get that response off of 2 different heads because of the speed. I notice on a double pedal, when I'm going super fast, you're waiting for that head to respond because it's being pushed in by the other pedal, and then when it's responding and coming back, it's being hit by the other pedal. So it's not optimal. I mean, I think it's more optimal to have 2 kicks and 2 pedals. It's going to give you a little bit faster response.
I feel the same way. Yep. Nylon or wood tip?
Wood tip.
Okay.
I just think it sounds a little more natural. If you're doing something where you really need clarity and you really want the cymbal, like a ride cymbal to come out, then I think a nylon tip is nice for that.
Yeah. Odd time or 4/4?
Both. I'm totally at home doing any or.
Okay. Do you prefer one of the over the other though?
Yeah, I mean, I do prefer the challenge of different time signatures, and we do that a fair amount in Flotsam. But I would say that even when you go listen to Rush songs, it's usually 4/4 or 5/4. It's usually those 3 time signatures. So I did do a record with a keyboard player named Jordan Rudess, who's the keyboard player for Dream Theater, and it was really an eye-opening experience because he sent me the sheet music for his songs. And he writes these beautiful melodies that just flow over the time signature. And the time signatures were just, 12/8, 3/4, 5/4, 7/4. I mean, it was just a crazy amount of different time signatures. And his melodies would just flow perfectly over all these different time signatures. So it is he's a Juilliard School of Music graduate. I think he went there since he was a very young man. And I think because of that, his brain works differently. Like most of us, we think of solidly, 4/4 or 5/4 or 7/4 or 6/8 or whatever the time signature is. We're thinking of that for, a huge chunk of the song or maybe most of the song. And he thinks about those time signatures in terms of like a measure or 2. And he'll be on to the next time signature, which is really unique. Like I found that really unique in writing. I don't know anyone else that writes like that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, he's one of my favorites. Dream Theater is just juggernaut on its own. Big drum kit or small drum kit?
Big drum kit, no question. Every time, all the time. It just gives you more sound sources. It helps you express yourself more. Gives you more of a palette to paint, so to speak.
Yep, I get that. Yep. Recording or playing live?
This is a both. I mean, I love both of those. I mean, I originally got into music to play live, and I really enjoy the rush of hearing an audience and the adrenaline that it gives you. That, you know, when the lights go down and you just hear that, you know, that screaming thing. I mean, there's nothing like it in the world. It's the most powerful drug I can think of. So, and that's the reason I got into the business. I didn't get into the business to go make records, but that being said, I love making records and I love that process too. So I have to say both.
Very cool. And last one, Flotsam or Jetsam?
Definitely Jetsam. Definitely Jetsam. It just sounds cooler. It's like Jetsam. You know, it sounds like it's got the word jet in it. Sounds like it's going to go fast. You know, absolutely. It's Jetsam all day long.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Where can our listeners find you, especially your studio?
They can find me on Instagram, Ken K. Mary Official. They can find me on Facebook, Ken Mary 1. That's the numeral 1. And because apparently somebody else had Ken Mary. I don't know who that is, but somebody must have had that. So, and that's like, I'm not on TikTok yet, but also I do have a YouTube channel, which I'm going to start actually loading things up to. So, I think that is also Ken K. Mary Official, I believe. So awesome. that would be how you would find me.
Cool, and we'll put all that on the episode as well. So,
thank you so much.
Of course, of course. So, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Well, I really like the title of your series as well, Drumming Up Conversation. I thought that was good.
Yeah, thank you.
You should only talk to drummers, though. You should like only talk to drummers.
We've actually tried that a lot. We've had good success with it. So awesome.
Excellent. Good. Well, I wish you the best of success, and I hope your cast goes awesome and does great things.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Drumming up conversation.